Well, a positive sign or not, the fact that inflation is still well above the Bank of Canada's target range is expected to lead to another interest rate hike in December. To talk about that, we're now joined by Kaylie Tiessen. She is an economist for Unifor, which is this country's largest private sector union. Ms. Tiessen, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So as you heard, the finance minister is giving a positive spin on the number. What's your take on it?
Well, I think we did see that the inflation rate held steady this year or this month, and just as the finance minister said, we had seen 3 months of decline before that. That's a really positive sign, particularly given that inflation is the #1 concern that we're hearing from all sorts of people across the economy right now. It's a really good sign, but we need to be doing more to fight inflation. We've seen the Bank of Canada do quite a bit. They've used the only tool that they have, but there are so many other tools that we could be using. We'd love to see more of those coming from the government.
Well, let's talk about that in a second, because
okay.
you mentioned the Bank of Canada, and the expectation is, as I said, in December we're looking at another rate hike. When you hear that, what's your concern?
I think what we need to do is take a pause. So we've seen 4 months now where the inflation rate has held steady or declined. We also know that more interest rate hikes could be causing a recession. A recession hurts workers when, in fact, inflation is not being caused by workers. Inflation is being caused by profiteering, by supply chain issues. So putting all of the pain on workers doesn't solve the problem. And in fact, we should be doing something quite different. So I'd like to see the Bank of Canada take a pause, take a breath, take in a few months more of data, and then make another decision.
And let's be clear, let's just connect the dots here. You say it creates pain for workers. In what way does it create pain for workers?
Yeah.
That might be an obvious question, but I think it's worthwhile to share.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we're trying to slow economic growth, we're trying to slow demand. That's what the interest rate hike does. It makes things more expensive and slows demand. That slows job creation and could create a recession. And a recession, by definition, will put people out of work. So the people who right now are struggling the most because of inflation will lose their jobs or will not get a job. And that creates a different kind of pain, or pain from a different sort of hammer that means that people still can't buy food, they still can't pay their rent, those things. So it's not the solution that we're looking for.
Mm-hmm. Not the solution you're looking for. So what solution are you looking for? Because I think part of the issue here is, for example, when the federal NDP leader, Jagmeet Singh, criticized the Bank of Canada, he took a lot of criticism himself for essentially risking political interference in an independent body. Is there not a risk of interfering with the Bank of Canada's mandate by making these types of demands? So
the Bank of Canada has a mandate to focus on the interest rate, but also needs to consider employment. That's something that was added into the mandate about 1.5 years ago, that they also need to be considering the effect of interest rates on jobs. So it's not just about the inflation rate, but also about the employment rate. And they need to be considering that as they're making these decisions. Increasing the interest rate again will likely tip us over into a recession that then will move us into higher unemployment.
So if they take a pause, what then can help? How do you tackle inflation if not raising an interest rate from the Bank of Canada?
So one of the things that is causing inflation is profiteering in a few industries, particularly oil and gas. We could talk about grocery stores, and addressing that through excess
That's
profit
not yet been
tax.
proven, though. I know that's been put out there, and I know they're posting high profits, but profiteering is a specific issue. So
in the second quarter of 2022, we saw that profits as a share of GDP was up to 25%. So 25% of the GDP created in the country was taken by profit. Before the pandemic, the average for the 5 years before the pandemic, that was at 15%. That was already an all-time high, and now we're seeing it shoot up dramatically. So I think we can say that profits are increasing prices and then siphoning some of the money out of the economy. We'd love to see workers taking a higher share of the GDP that's created.
How does that help them, though? How does that bring down inflation?
So two things could happen if we, for example, introduced or expanded the excess profits tax. We could either use that money to pay for things that are expensive, like pharmacare, dental care. We've seen the implementation of affordable childcare, which brings down costs for families who need childcare dramatically. We're seeing the results of that across the country. Same thing could happen with pharmacare and dental care. And the other thing that could happen is firms could actually change their behavior and lower their profit margins and then lower prices in order for people to be able to afford things again.
And that is, of course, as I say, you're with Unifor. That's something that your organization has been lobbying federal politicians this past week about. From what you've seen, what's been the reception to your message?
We've heard that excess profit tax and expanding that excess profit tax, I think, is something that is worth considering, and we're seeing that people are very receptive to that message as one additional tool in the toolbox to fighting inflation.
Kaylie, thank you for that. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.